So my name is Anton. Good afternoon. Let's start. So today we'll talk about the architecture, never which never gets old. I mean UNA architecture, but from the point of view of the Python language. And I think it's very important to discuss it within this context because of two reasons. First of all, this ecosystem of Python, it grows with every year. It's not dominating, but it shows a very steady growth. Python is very easy to use, to prototype, to start learning the programming language, small and large automation. So that's why we pay more and more attention on that. Even based on my experience of communicating with manual testers, the specialists who just want to enter this area of automation, all of them ask a classical question: why do we learn Java? Or why do we use Java so often if it's much easier to start with Python? And one more thing is that there is, because this language of coding, I mean Python, is very laconic, it's always very clear, even without the infrastructure. And some say, let's just use it without doing anything else. But when we have a critical mass of automatic tests accumulated, it's too late to do anything because we just have to explain to customers why we need stabilizing sprint, to rewrite what's been already written, spending weeks or months for that. So somebody has to take responsibility for that, right? So that's why we'll be talking about diagrams, or at the level of diagrams. And this is a legend for these diagrams, which will show that we have entities, we have some comments, we have arrows, and we'll use all that. So it's not classical UNI, it's pseudo UNI, because I think that except for some really high weight, heavy projects and methodologies, we don't have to follow the annotations from end to end. So talking about automation, it doesn't matter which language we use, but we have to separate our three main layers, and very often it's very convenient when we have an external data source with locators. And I understand that for Python, especially taking into account that the syntaxes of language of coding, and the syntaxes for working with sets and tulip is very laconic, but nevertheless we don't want to use locators to shift locators to the external files. But we have to think about that. Maybe we have to use that because it's very convenient when, in order to update our automation tests after changing the layout, we don't even have to open the IDEA. So we just take the external file and update it. Also, for more or less big applications, especially for the product ones, we normally have two options. So this app can be 95% standard, but 5% different, depending on the country, depending on the personal, or we have rebranding of the product under which it is sold, and the difference are just several features, buttons and controls, and it's much more convenient not to send the tests but to have a stable nucleus of tests on Python and a set of external files which will be common for 95% of cases and specific for the customer, for the company which does rebranding, etc. So that's why we have to consider that at least. So which layers can be defined, which ones are always there. So it's clear that the top one is the test level, and then the test is based on the business actions. Business actions are implemented via one or more low-level actions, and low-level actions in turn are associated, in most cases, not always, but there are some exceptions, but in most cases are associated with page object. The concept of page object is identical, always the same. It doesn't matter which language we use. And standard tools like Page Factory are all implemented on Python language. So also we can use the lazy initialization. Yes, syntaxes will be even simpler, even so there will be even less code, but from the conceptual point of view it will be all the same. And as a result, we'll have page object, which normally is a logical, not physical page. If we talk about Python, uh, so it will be in most cases it will be an object. It's like playing with statical classes in Python. Normally it doesn't make sense because it's so convenient to work with objects and we don't have to create, release. We don't have to think about the method of creation. And that's why we have page objects, which are objects, logical pages, which can be so we can use some standard approaches like Page Factory, which can be installed, easily installed, and then it's 200% can be integrated in this ecosystem. Low-level actions in this case will be will rule the methods. It will be private methods, and we don't specify private, public, and so the interaction of these layers is same as with any standard layers. So the ones that are at the top, they operate only at the level that is right behind it, and the level layer that is behind doesn't know anything about the layers above. So in which cases we can make a more complex system? In the cases when we work with complex environments, I mean uh, versatile, when the logic of apps is identical, but we have native app for iOS, for Android, and web app, for example. I will tell you honestly, in practice I very rarely encountered use of packing for mobile automation. Nevertheless, Appium, it can be friended with Appium, and in the future it can be used more often. It will be used more often, I think. So, if we talk about the main three layers, so we have Selenium WebDriver, we have some Selenium wrapper. Um, in Python ecosystem, wrappers are not that powerful. There are not so many of them, but they are there. And in the same way, independent of the language we use, we have some specific behavior for our app, for our domain. For example, it's some pagination or scrolling, some non-standard action. And so there will be quite few of those. That's why the helper has to be very small, very lightweighted, and as a result, we have UI engine which we can implement as a smart singleton, and inside it will be a web driver plus our very lightweighted helper and maybe a wrapper. But writing or coding wrapper on your own, it's too superfluous even for such a free or flexible system as Python. So, what are the relations of all the components I've listed? So, in any case, I think that visualization of our interactions, it is very important. Just at least because when we just think about that, talk about that, we can skip something. Maybe our image will be different from that of colleagues. But when you put it on paper, when you draw it like that, then you see it, and then you can discuss every of these ties, arrows, whether we need it or not. If there are no good arguments why we leave this or that tie, then we delete it. So the less arrows we have, the better, without losing functionality, of course. And so in when we don't use page factory or any other specific connection to Selenium, the page object doesn't interact with driver at all. For example, the low-level actions are 100% interacting with the driver, and in the ideal situation, we need 1 or 2 points of interaction. Then we have business actions, which in the ideal case don't know anything about the UI engine. After years, we realized finally that we need some other UI engine, and we just replace it just like that. And our tests didn't change visually at all. And also, if we have a complex logic and we use based on that, so we shift to desktop, and in the ideal case, it's of course very difficult to reach this ideal, but with almost no cost, we have business action, business cases. So all the what, what's inside will change, be adapted for desktop. So when our page object is not just a container of locators, but also is connected to the library or to a wrapper above this library. Yes, in this case, we'll have additional arrows. It's not bad, but we just have to draw them. We have to be aware of them, and we have to decide whether we need them and how will we use them. It's not just another element in the page factory that I need. And the classical statement is, okay, we'll have initialization, but how many seconds will you save on to lazy initialization when we don't have optimal expectations and we spend an hour in leaps and try to get something from this initialization from the start? Well, yeah, we have to remember about the 3A rule, as the language is very laconic, it's very concise, so we are very flexible and we can break some rules. Well, that's clear, but because it's anyway easily transformed, but in any case, our test has to follow the arrange, act, and set rule, and any manual test will. So in automation test, we need maximum localization of the context and error. So we need, there has to be one business action, one logical action, maybe consisting of several steps, and one logical check. Only that will be a guarantee that we make localization at the maximum possible extent. That doesn't work in all cases. Sometimes for optimization we have to glue our tests, otherwise too much time will be spent on that. But we have to do it like being aware of what we are doing and register this action. So, okay, this test we are doing, it has arrange, act, set structure, and of course, this has to work at the level of business actions. It will be quite strange if you don't do the action analogous to the user, or you request the database to change something, and then you just start checking whether it works okay. No. Arrange. Okay, in the ideal world, regardless of what language you use, it all has to work at the level of business actions. It's possible, not in all cases. Sometimes you have to use some additional ways, some private IP or public IP, or you can use, I don't know, like deployment of database, retrieval of database. But all these actions have to be done. I mean, very well understanding why you do that, what is the reason, how. For example, we do it to save the time. But why do we need to save the time? Is it critical? Maybe we don't have to do that at all. And if our first phase, rearrange, works with this or that entities, with the database, with the Sapien, with the classical REST engine, SOAP engine, then again, sometimes we use external data sources to configure all that. And again, we have a temptation to create a lightweighted object in Python. It's very easy because so it has to be one and the same entity because it's orthogonal to our automated tests. So don't be lazy and use smart singleton in this case. So again, this is our act, which has to be based on business actions strictly and our research. So again, we have to remember that there are many variants of assert. It can be a classical test runner. Normally in Python, there are three most popular ones, and all of them have their advantages and disadvantages, but the functionality is different. So that's why it's hard to assess those. But in any case, we need an assert engine, which is normally part of the test runner. And we all that is combined looks like a disaster, of course, but we made this image as simple as possible. You remember that. So this is one more illustration that in any case you have to make audit of our solution for automation. From time to time we have to visualize it, and it helps young specialists, it helps to see some additional ties and connections. Even at the level of visualization, we separate and divide and rule because it's easier to work with separate components. Because every picture taken separately, every component taken separately is quite easy to understand and use. And all these global entities are orthogonal to our project, and they have to be smart singletons. Although they are easy to use in Python, you don't even think, you just create a logger, remove a logger, shift a logger, and it's much easier to use smart singleton. And also you can add the reporting engine to it. And also, very often, I'm asked, do we need to use the PDD approach for Python? Well, it seems like it's can be read quite easily, very well, and very easy. But do we need keyword based, or do we need to use other analogous approaches like the cell based fluent interface?
I think the fluid interface, in many cases, has an anti-approach and anti-pattern. It only works for the most difficult domain, and usually is applicable from 10,000 tests and on. But if we talk about the Python, since we don't have a strict typization, it's easy to implement it there, and in Python you can divide by 10, even for the medium complication divide domain, and 1,000 plus tests, this could be justifiable. Let's ask the question again, should it be done for Python? I think we should take a step back and understand that all these approaches are, first and foremost, not only about technical solution, but also about the process solution, like the PGD, Durkin. It's just an out-of-the-box approach that gives us possibilities to raise this topic at one of these cases in PGD as a triangle. The same is true about the fluent interface. no matter whether it's a keyword based or other DSL. It's all based on the DSL, which means that and this is has some additional information. And here I think we can stop. I don't have any code examples because the code is so simple, and I thought, what kind of examples of code snippets should I include? But I saw that the code is simple everywhere. It's more about telling you about the conceptual approaches and telling you how they apply, like they apply to the Python and the Python ecosystem. That's it from me, and ask questions. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Thank you for your presentation. I got interested in the part with the range study in the test. You said that you should use the business action. So the question is, usually low-level interfaces are used for a range, so that all the tests used in the range stage will not just launch. That's a good commentary, good remark. Let's say, ideally, if our system is bad enough not to run basic things through the AI, maybe they should be fixed. Indeed, the workaround sometimes is needed, but conceptually, ideally, we should do everything business action. We may not have to do this, for example. Often the functionality is not stable, although logically UI automation should become more stable first. But we have a workaround for this purpose. Or our business actions simply working too slowly. And we, working through the database, want to make this process faster. Otherwise, we make the feedback every night, not during the day. So we must start with the idea, and as soon as we understand that we want to deflect, we need to answer the question why. I think that should be the approach. Thank you for your question. It was an important one. If there are no more questions, I think we should award the person who asked the question. It's wonderful. It doesn't happen very often. It's easy to select the person who asked the best question. You'll get a t-shirt. I would like to thank everyone once again. You have my contact information. Please feel free to ask questions. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. Goodbye.